Hello, this is Bailey Bell, and this is the Teens in the D Community Perspective. Welcome to our show. Today we'll be talking about the recent controversial and historical election. The 2020 election has been said to be historical for many, many reasons. And one of the things I recently became aware of was the unified support of a group called the Divine Nine. I learned that the Black Greek Letter Organization, or BGLO, pushed to support voter registration and voting in our communities. As you know, we are witnessing history with the election of President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. Vice President-elect Harris is a Black and Indian American woman. None of those have ever been held in office before. Additionally, Senator Harris is a proud graduate of Howard University and a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated. Today, we have Mrs. Sheree Garner. Mrs. Garner is an attorney and currently serving in the Regulatory Council with Quicken Loans, and she is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Mrs. Garner. I'd like to start off with asking you a question about what is the Divine Nine and why is it so important to unite members of the group for the election?
Well, nice to meet you, Bailey. Good to talk to you. I'm happy to be here. To answer your question, the Divine Nine is the conglomerate of all the Black Greek letter organizations that represent kind of a wide spectrum of college educated folks that wanted to participate in Greek life. And the first of the organizations that was founded was Alpha Phi Alpha. It is the oldest of the Divine Nine and was founded in 1906, and followed by my illustrious sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which was founded in 1908. And the organizations that followed catered to a variety of interests because, like everything else in life, we as people of color, Black people, are not monolithic. And so every organization is unique. It represents a cross segment of Black life. But the one thing that we have in common is our unwavering commitment to service. That is the bedrock of each organization, is that we were founded with the purpose of sisterhood and brotherhood, but also to make life better for Black people. Because if you consider when the organizations were founded, it was in a time where we're in like the post-slavery but pre-Reconstruction era of the United States, where segregation, Jim Crow, any and everything that impacted the quality of Black life. Black people weren't allowed to get educated in predominantly white institutions. So like we do anything else, we create our own for our own. And that is really what the crux of the Black Greek letter organizations were founded for. It was our community. And while we have members of all races, believe it or not, our primary focus is to strive to continue to reach out to folks in our own communities and make sure that we are doing our part, because we're educated. We want to lift up the generations behind us, but also represent our founders very well.
Okay, thank you. And I think that is something that is very awesome and like just absolutely fantastic that you guys are doing. My mom herself is in a sorority. She's a Delta, and I see a lot of the behind the scenes of what you guys did for this election. And that actually leads me to my next question is, do you have any idea how effective your efforts were and all the Divine Nice efforts were to increase voter registration and the actual voting process?
Absolutely. Well, let me just go back and say that our involvement in the electoral process didn't start with this election. It was historic and it was significant because we have a member of the Divine Nine that is not only the vice president elect, but she purposely elevated us and our profile to the world to speak and to discuss and to share how her membership in Alpha Kappa Alpha helped to shape her as a young college student, as a young law student, as a young lawyer, and as she progressed through her career. She never forgot where she came from, and not in a sense that, you know, she has to be reminded of anything, but it was that support that gave her the courage and the strength that she needed to persist and remember that she's never alone. She has sisters all across this globe that carry that same common bond. And whether they are members of Alpha Kappa Alpha or Delta Sigma Theta or Zeta Phi Beta or Sigma Gamma Rho in any of the fraternities, we all decided to come together to support her because that's the one thread that comes through our commitment to service, is that we are involved in the electoral process. And so our involvement stems all back to our founding. Alpha Kappa Alpha women, Delta Sigma Theta women, and has been involved in the women's suffrage movement. You're talking, 100 years ago. Our organization is still, we were founded in 1908, but our involvement in civil rights activity goes hand in hand with the election process. And so it was super significant because it brings it almost full circle. If you think about the election of the historic election of President Obama in 2008, it was bringing the country to a place where they could see a person of color in the highest leadership role. And now another barrier has been broken because now we have a woman of color who is closing the gap and closing the loop rather on the image of what is electable. So that's why it's super significant.
I was watching the results and it was like a historic turnout this year. Like we had like millions of people voting. They were saying it's the most America has voted in literally years.
The history.
Right. History.
Yeah, the history. Yeah.
The next question I have is, you are originally from Detroit, I believe.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So as the election results were coming in, were you watching the results from Detroit, like from Atlanta, or just overall just watching the results coming from all over the country?
I was watching from home here in Atlanta. I am originally from Detroit, and I am a Detroiter at heart. I'm a Detroiter that happens to live in Atlanta, put it that way. Atlanta hasn't really, it has not changed the core of who I am. I still have a Detroit cell phone number. I still identify myself as a Detroiter because that is the place where I was molded and I was shaped in. I still have, my family is still there. And so I am deeply invested in the outcomes of elections that impact the city of Detroit and the region of Southeast Michigan. So I was very in tune to what was happening with the challenges of the ballot challenges that were occurring the night of the election. But I was watching intently also because, to your point earlier, this election garnered the most votes of any presidential election in history, even President Obama in 2007 going into 2008. This is the highest net or grossing election in terms of votes. And so I knew that it was going to be a long process. I knew that the groundswell of absentee votes was going to impact the way the ballots would be counted and the timing of when we would find out who would be the next president of the United States. And I was kind of prepared for that process because a lot of the states that had a huge influx of absentee ballots, their state election laws do not permit the counting of absentee ballots in advance of election day. And so when you kind of they're kind of handicapped in the sense that they have to wait until all of the actual in-person votes are counted, then they can count the absentee ballot. And so that's one reason why I believe that this current president was so successful in promoting that narrative that there is an opportunity for ballot fraud, voter fraud, which are still allegations that are unproven. But this process, I think, as we kind of went on day 2, day 3, and people were like, "God, when is it going to be over?"
Yeah,
it's a direct result of the fact that every state is different. The federal government does not dictate how states must count ballots. And because they don't have oversight into that process, they are at the mercy, or we all are at the mercy of each state and how they choose to handle the ballot counting. And it varies from county to county and from city to city too. So it's all over the place.
it's like as we were waiting for the results, like we wait for the big counties to come, especially in Georgia, because we were one of the first places to close our polls, yet we still were one of the last states to give our results. Yeah. And talking about voting, you know, a lot of on social media, it's been talking about a lot about the power of the Black woman vote. And how do you think that as Black women ourselves, how do you think that our vote, I can't vote, I'm not 18 yet, but as a Black woman, how do you think that the vote of the Black woman influenced the presidential race, specifically in Detroit and Atlanta?
Well, I will say that Black women are the reason why. It is one of the most significant reasons why we have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as the president-elect and the vice president-elect. Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. We do the work. We understand the issues because we are uniquely situated as a voting bloc and as a group within the larger microcosm of the United States. If you consider the fact that we are a triple minority in the sense we're women, we're women of color, and a lot of times we are people, we fall in categories, and again, we're not monolithic because there are Republican Black women, but we often find ourselves in categories that are fall into kind of like the stereotypes of socioeconomic statuses. So a lot of time a lot of Black women fall in the higher educated population, but there's a significant group of a number of us below the poverty line. So we are more likely to single family homes. Be in single parent households. We tend to have multiple jobs, which don't necessarily translate to multiple streams of income. And so to that, we're also the least paid in terms of race, and we tend to earn, I think, 45 cents on the dollar in comparison to our white male counterparts. And we are still trending like 20 to 30 cents behind white women. And so when you consider the issues that uniquely impact us, everything from healthcare all the way down to how much you earn and the wealth gap, we are still fighting the good fight. And we're still living with, one of my favorite words is vestiges. We are still living with the vestiges of oppression from a historical standpoint, because even when the suffragist movement was going on in the early 20th century, that did not include Black women. We were specifically excluded from the suffrage movement because white women were trying to secure their right to vote. They were seeking independence from their husbands and being able to own their own. And that narrative didn't include us. And so when we started to look for identity politics and look for parties that represented what felt like could be a home for us, the Democratic Party we kind of fell into that, even though the Democratic Party was not always favorable to people of color, we still, when the Voting Rights Act was ultimately signed, and when you look at the faces that fought the good fight, when you think about the civil rights movement, look at who were helped was, well, even though men were at the forefront, women were the engines, and we still function like that today. And so I think that that's one reason why here in Atlanta, Stacey Abrams is getting all of her roses, because she was a candidate for governor in 2018, and we believe strongly that she was a victim of voter and election fraud, because it was a very close race between her and the current governor. And it was about a difference of 54,000 votes that caused her to lose the election. And there were specific tactics that were used to suppress votes in certain areas that would have yielded her a higher turnout that we know would have been more likely than not that she would have gotten the votes that she needed, first Black governor of the state of Georgia. And so here is one reason why Atlanta and a lot of the blue areas in the state of Georgia, which happen to be the most populated as well, they turned out because they understood the significance of what Stacey represented. And so that's why here, and even in Detroit, when you think about the Black vote in Detroit, I think we were responding to a number of things. This president has always been kind to minorities, but also this pandemic has been very devastating. So when we turned out to vote in Michigan, it was because they wanted a change. Something has to be done, and it was not going to happen in the current administration. So, I know that's a long answer, but that's one reason why it's significant. Like the Black female vote, we represent a strong voice, and I think it was time for us to be recognized for the role that we play in politics.
Yes, well, we're on the topic of powerful Black women. You are a member of AKA, and you're also a sorority sister of Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. And while we talk about her, what are some emotions and feelings expressed between you and your sorority sisters as you know the journey that Kamala Harris is about to go through as a woman of color in the position that she's going to be in? How are you guys feeling about that? How are you guys going to support her, be behind her as she goes through this journey?
I felt an overwhelming sense of emotion. I was choked up because I saw the possibility. Even as an adult, you never stop growing, you never stop dreaming, and for little girls to be able to see themselves in the future, but also it reminds you of the power of yourself. We've been overlooked for so long as women, and then as women of color on top of that. I think that's what is so significant about seeing her in this role and being on the national stage. I talked with my line sisters a lot about it because we're mothers. And I remember 4 years ago, my daughter was barely a year old when Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 race. And I went into voting. I took her with me to vote. She was little. She was in the chest carrier. And I remember it. I'm like, I'm voting for possibly the first female president of the United States. I was filled with so much hope. And I looked at her, and as I was voting, and I was thinking about her future, and that if this woman could make it, anything is possible. So when she did not win the election, I went into a panic, not because she lost, but because who she lost to. And I knew that this world, I felt a sense of hopelessness. I knew that the world is already unkind. And I worried about how much more I was going to worry about her trying to hold space as she grows up in a world that views something that's immutable about her color and her gender. How that was going to take on in such, in some of the worst ways. And some of our worst fears came true. You think about some of the horrible things that have happened just in 2020 alone with the racial injustices, and which have been going on before now, to be fair. But it came to a head on top of this pandemic. So when Kamala won, I I virtually dropped to my knees because I couldn't believe it, because now I'm looking at my daughter, who's now 5, and she's lived through this entire administration, and I saw this level of hope. And I was like, not only does she get to see a woman in one of the highest offices in the land, she gets to see a woman that looks like her. So it made me reflect on that same day 4 years ago. And I thought, little did I know that that hopelessness was something that was in the works that I even couldn't have imagined. I couldn't have imagined this 4 years ago. I couldn't have imagined this 4 months ago. I was hopeful, but I couldn't imagine it to be true. And so that's one thing that my line sisters and I, and our sorority as a whole, and members of the Divine Nine, we all collectively feel this sense of kinship, not just because she's a member of one of the Divine Nine organizations, but because she is one of us. And that is, you can't get any more powerful than that.
And with the position she's now going to hold, how do you believe that this is going to affect our nation as a whole, and like just the communities across the nation?
I think that people will start to see that America is changing. And it's a slow change, but it's a steady change. It will ebb and flow. We will have a pendulum swing. One day we could have another Republican president. We might have another Democratic president, but we could have a third party candidate that comes along and changes the entire, playing field, that in a way in which we had Kanye West run. So, it's like you can't close it out, but that's the part that I think is so unique and fascinating about our electoral process, is that anything is possible. It used to be that anything was possible just for white men, and now anything is possible for all of us. And that is what we want to see. We want our elections, we want our government to reflect us, and not just Black people, but to reflect the entire spectrum of what the United States looks like.
Right. Okay. I was informed that you attended Tennessee State University, which is an HBCU. And I was going to ask if you could share how this college prepared you and other grades you attended.
TSU is special to me for a number of reasons. A lot of people, if you ask someone ask other graduates of historically Black colleges, they will say that they've always wanted to go to a Black college. They are oftentimes the first person in their family to attend college. And they're drawn to Black colleges because it feels like home and it feels safe. And it does, and it did for me. But I went to TSU for a very unique and specific reason. My grandparents were graduates of Tennessee State University, and so were my aunts. And I grew up, my grandfather was the dean of the College of Education there. I grew up literally on TSU's campus. Even though I'm from Detroit, I would go spend my summers with my Nana and my grandfather. I would go to class with him. At night, he taught classes during the day, and then he taught evening classes. And I would spend the day with my Nana, and then my grandfather would come home, eat dinner, and then he's like, "You ready to go?" And I would go sit in class with him. And it was, an hour and a half, and I'd sit there, and not that I knew whatever it was that he was talking about. I was 6, but it was a very special place for me. And when I was looking at considering colleges to go to, I applied to Michigan, and I applied to Michigan State, and I applied to Florida A&M. I applied to a pocket of Black colleges, and I applied to like all of the, the traditional schools that people tend to go to from the Midwest. And when my grandfather passed away when I was 17. And so it was right before my senior year of high school. And I thought about my grandmother just being in Nashville kind of alone. And not that she was an old, lonely lady, but, I could not think of a better way to honor my grandparents and to consider the fact that I was fortunate to have college-educated grandparents that shared so many stories about how when they were coming up and how they felt fortunate enough to get an education, albeit even at a Black school, what they had to go through to be able to get educated. And I felt like it was such an honor. And to walk on the same campus that my grandparents walked on, to sit in the same buildings that they learned, and to absorb the space and absorb the almost like the ancestors and the folks that were there before them. And so it feels like home. And if somebody were to ask me where my favorite place besides my mother's kitchen, I would say the camp issue. It prepared me for the real world because this narrative so often, particularly in the Black community, that Black college is cute, that's nice, but I'm going to such and such. I'm gonna go to Harvard. I'm gonna go. It's always, we're always looked at as kind of like the second best. And it couldn't be further from the truth because it taught me how to be competitive. Because when I law school, I was looking around my class and I was sitting next to kids that had gone to the Ivies. I was sitting next to kids that had gone to the Big Tens. And so I knew I was ready for it. I wouldn't be there if I couldn't be there. And it gave me an overwhelming sense of confidence. I did not feel less than, even though my confidence was challenged at times. But I knew that I had what it took to get through what I needed to get through to graduate and take the bar exam. And even to go on to graduate school, because after I left, I went to Ohio State for law school after leaving TSU. And then I went to George Washington University in Washington, D.C. to get a graduate degree. And each turn, I was even more prepared. And I keep going back to my experience at TSU and how it shaped me. And it gave me what I needed to be who I am.
Yes, I really appreciate the HBCU comments because I myself would like to go to an HBCU. You mentioned FAMU, and that is my number one college that I would like to.
Now, that is our rival, but I forgive you, baby. Oh my God. I know you're gonna be a Delta too. Oh my God. So but I love you anyway, girl. Okay.
I do, and I don't know about sorority. I'm still thinking. My mom would very much like Delta, but definitely the HBCU 100% want to go there. I have one of the best journalism schools, but
yeah,
to get back and talk about the election again, a little bit personal. I know you kind of answered it earlier, but I want to get a direct answer. And why do you think there was such a great urgency this election for people to get out and vote? And just why do you feel like there's such a great urgency?
I think in addition to the fact that, let me just be 100% honest too, there was not a great level of excitement about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when they won the nomination. Let's be 100% honest. I think because we were so focused as a nation, those of us that are Democratic and independent voters that were leaning towards the Democratic ticket, we wanted progressive candidates. We wanted people that we thought were electable, because that's the other thing you have to remember too, baby, and you'll hear a lot of this, is that folks like to focus on what's electable. How can you appeal to the greatest amount of people with somebody who is just fits enough categories? You're not going to be able to satisfy everybody, but how can we find someone that kind of fits the perfect, there's just enough mayonnaise to get across the bread. Might not get corner to corner, but you got to get just enough. And the field of Democratic candidates, they got whittled down and whittled down and whittled down. It became less and less like the diverse America that we are at this point. And it came all the way back down to a 70-some-year-old white man. And that was a complete repudiation of what we had seen in 2007 when Obama was running. And then again, when he ran again in 2012, we really wanted to see progress. So the wind was knocked out of a lot of our sails. And we thought that Kamala Harris might have been too polarizing. Becoming elected, ain't no way. We thought America was going to try to elect her to be the president. Oh my God, And there was infighting amongst Black people because Black people felt that she was more extreme. There was a whole narrative that was going around about her prosecutorial record, which is complicated, but it's complicated for a lot of reasons that go above people's heads. Like we, as a lot of times as voters, we are a mile wide and an inch deep. They like buzzwords. They don't really understand the nuances about who a person can be or who they are. And so there was not a lot of excitement about the two of them securing the Democratic nomination. But with that said, I think that the reason why it was so important is because you have to look at what we have in office right now. This, by and large, was, say what you want about President Trump, and I can't believe I'm saying that, but because I never say that out loud, but say what you want about him as a polarizing figure, his administration has been a failure. And our economy and our population, our citizens, are under threat of this pandemic that is going to destroy us if we don't get it under control. And so, aside from his antics, his administration has not been about the business of governing. And you ask the average voter or average citizen, well, they might not articulate that. They can just see what they sit in every day and their lives. People have lost their jobs. They're losing their homes. I work for one of the largest lenders in America, and I see the numbers every day. I see the rates of forbearances and potential foreclosures. This thing is real. It's not just about the virus itself attacking your body. It is destroying our economy, and it's becoming less and less tenable for us to keep going in this direction when you have a leader who's not interested in government. He just wants to win. And so that's the part, and that's a difficult job. Being the president is probably the most difficult job. It's like having 300 million children. You have to take care of us, and we have to trust that you have our best interest at heart. And so that is why I think that people felt compelled to come out and vote. Now, it's a lot of them that voted for him. We're still trying to figure out why, but I won't get into that. But but for those of us that voted with our conscience, that voted with our future in mind, that voted with our present in mind, we knew we couldn't keep going down this path.
Yes, and I really appreciate your time with us today. So I have one final question. And what would be your advice to teens like me who were not old enough to vote yet, and what we would like to exercise our voice? Like, what would you suggest that we do?
Continue doing what you're doing, baby. And think about, get active and get involved in organizations that have a service component to it. And if any organization that's worth its weight in salt would expose you to the electoral process, they may or may not influence how you vote, but they would encourage you to vote, and they would encourage you to get involved locally. And that is the biggest piece of advice I would tell you, is to stay involved in local politics no matter where you live, because all politics are local. Yes, we're invested in what's happening with the presidential election, but what's most consequential to you is who your sheriff is, who your your county prosecutor is, who your district attorneys are, who are the judges that are elected, who are your city council people, who are your county commissioners, who has say over the police departments. You want to make sure that you're staying in touch with the folks that touch your day-to-day life, because those are the seats that really, really matter. And they have direct influence over how your life is gonna flow. So that's what I would encourage you to do as a young person that's not necessarily eligible to vote. And also pay attention to the politics. If something doesn't sit right, chances are it's not right. You don't want to be on the wrong side of history. It doesn't mean that you have to follow lockstep or you have to agree with everything, because again, Black people aren't monolithic. America's not monolithic. So you have to vote with your head and sometimes your heart. They're not reasonable things, but you have to think about not just yourself, but how would a policy impact someone that's less fortunate than you? And that's where I think we have to kind of maintain our positioning and our trajectory. Think about the people who are the least of these and how those policies could affect them. And also think about people that are coming behind you, because the decisions that you make as a voter affects your children, your brothers and sisters, your friends, your little cousins. There are going to be generations that are coming behind you. So what do you want to leave them? So that's what I would advise you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garner. It was truly a pleasure speaking with you, and I learned a lot from this interview, and I'm sure our viewers will too. And this has been Bailey Bell from Teens in the D Community Perspective.